So, what is Crowbar? Well, that's a crowbar, and you can use it for opening boxes, but maybe not deploying OpenStack. Turns out this is also Crowbar. They're a heavy metal band in New Orleans, and we could ask them if we can deploy OpenStack, but I'm not sure the answer we'd get. This looks like it'll help. It's a command line utility we've got for controlling, and it will really help us get from this, which is a rack of machines or a data center, to this woefully outdated flowchart that it invariably turns up in every OpenStack presentation ever, which is also completely wrong, but we won't go into that. So Crowbar was started by Dell in 2011, and was a way to configure cluster software. So like OpenStack could do things like that on bare metal machines. Dell stepped back a little bit, and SUSE took over in 2013, and we've focused it onto OpenStack so that it only deals with OpenStack. So we'll go through a little bit of what Crowbar can do. We've got a CLI, web interface, a REST interface. That is a terrible screenshot of the web interface. It can deploy as much or as little of OpenStack as you want. If you only want Keystone and Swift because you want object storage, you can do that, or you can go all the way up to Horizon, Heat, Magnum, the whole picnic basket, as it were. We do high availability, so you can do master slave or N+1. Cup of coffee, unintended install, so you can point it at a machine and say, please install an OS and configure it. Same sort of thing that's been known as Kickstarter or whatever the Solaris thing was that I can never remember. We can configure Ceph, and we can integrate that into the OpenStack deployment so that things like Glance and Cinder, you make use of Ceph. It'll pixie boot and use IPMI to install machines and discover them. And one feature we're working on right now is upgrades between OS releases and OpenStack releases, so that you get a web interface or a CLI to be able to say, let's upgrade to the new version of OpenStack. So how does it work? We have Crowbar on an admin node, and that provides DNS, DHCP, and other services. So this is a bar clamp, which some of you may or may not know. But this is an actual bar clamp with respect to Crowbar. They're a mini Rails application containing everything that Crowbar needs to know about configuration and how to deploy the thing in question, whether it's Nova or Keystone or even a database. And we do this by leveraging Chef. Not that Chef. That Chef, the configuration management system. So drilling down into bar clamp, we've got a high-level YAML file which describes the bar clamp, its dependencies, its name, things like that, and groups that it's a member of. Each bar clamp comes with one or more Chef cookbooks which contain attribute service definitions, things like that of that nature, so that it knows how to deploy them with Chef. Each recipe deals with one piece. For example, there's a server recipe for Horizon which deals with just how to deploy the server side of Horizon without worrying about monitoring Horizon or anything like that, for example. Chef has the concept of data bags, and Googling for that was not a good plan. Which is what they sound like, bags to hold data. We use them to hold the schema and the default values for the configuration. We also use this for schema migration if the database that Crowbar uses needs to change. We have roles, and I really couldn't find a good image for this either. Google kept thinking I meant, bread rolls. So they are one or more recipes, and they're applied to a machine. So you can pretty much say that this machine is our controller node, and it has the Nova API role as well as, say, the Horizon server recipe and things like that. And that controls how the packages are installed and how the configuration is applied across all the machines. And the other half of the coin is Rails. Each bar clamp has a model and a view and a controller because Rails. And that enables the REST API and the web interface. They both talk to the same backend. And the command line client makes REST API calls, so it just uses the whole same thing. Rule stack. So this turned up at a few OpenStack summits. So Atlanta and Paris are the two I'm going to talk about in 2014, in Vancouver in 2015. It was sponsored by Intel, I believe. They gave you a bunch of hardware in a rack, and people compete to see who can deploy OpenStack the fastest, and their bonuses given for things like using HA or deploying using heat. And there's penalties for not deploying the latest release of OpenStack or not being able to deploy and things like that. So in Paris, two of my colleagues used Crowbar to deploy a 4-node HA OpenStack Cloud in just under an hour, sorry. They deployed 2 admin nodes for Crowbar, one as a standby, and 2 controllers running the API service and the database, and 2 compute nodes. I believe no one else in that particular rule stack managed to finish a deploy, but I'm not certain. And in Vancouver, we took home first place and second place. One of my colleagues used a small part of Crowbar called Kiwi to deploy a small cloud. The walk time was 11 minutes, but as you can see there, scored a negative time because of the bonuses. The second place was using Crowbar, which was another 6-node cloud, not using HA, deployed in 23 minutes, with the final result being declared as 10. Demo, which I'm not really sure how it's going to work because I've got a bunch of stuff running in Nuremberg, but we'll see. Let me see. Oh, right. So I've got my development environment up, and this is just going to look awkward. So let's pick a bar clamp. Cinder looks good. So you can see the configuration that we've got there, how we select disks, the backends for Cinder and things like that. This is just using a default backend, which I think is just give me a bunch of files on a disk and deal. Which nodes it's deployed to. You can group those nodes, and you can say, I want all these nodes in this group to have this service on it. And if we hit the raw information, this is the JSON representation, which is more than what is displayed with the HTML. This is sort of more under the hood stuff. So I am, where's that other window gone? Actually, first of all, where's my cursor gone? Is that large enough for everyone, or do I need to increase the font? So one person who's a known troublemaker. So if we have a look here, we've got, this is the admin node, and this is the controller node that we've got. So you can see, for example, that we have a Cinder configuration file, which is large and contains a lot of details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back here, and I'm going to... That's a good one, let's change that. So there's a use multipart setting, and I'm going to change that from false to true. And I'm going to tell it to go and apply changes. So in the background, this is going through and rerunning chef across everything and making sure that everything changes and is up to date. So if we come along here, you should see that, if I can type, it's a possibility. We have a chef client running. And based on the load average, it's probably doing something. So if we look at, if we grep out the multipart settings out of Cinder, we can see that it hasn't applied yet because the top setting there, use multipart for image X for false, is still there and commented out. And I wish I'd timed how long chef took on this machine. Right. And that is still going. Processing. Now, the other demo I was going to plan to do was to add another node, and based on how long this was taking, I don't think I'm going to have enough time. So what I might do at this point is sort of open up for questions, see if any of you have got some clever things to say, or suggestions on what I could show you about Crowbar.
Is the Crowbar available for other distributions like Debian, as an example?
So we have a little bit of support for other distributions, not very well tested, but we're certainly available to taking patches for it, but it is mostly focused on SUSE, and for that matter, SLES, the enterprise distribution of SUSE. And we can see here now that Chef is actually completed and is now set use multipath for image X for true. Now, the use multipath in the Cinder bar clamp is actually kind of special in the fact that it also changes the Nova configuration. And we can look at the same thing in the Nova configuration and see here that it's also enabled those two settings in the Nova configuration as well. Oh, that went well. And it's still playing. Awesome. Right, any other questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, does Crowbar do any validation checking on your inputs? So like you said, true, false there, or ranging, so does it do any
Right,
blind checks?
so the schema has type checking. So for example, if I said use multipath foo, then it would say this is not a Boolean value, please use a Boolean value. So there's small amount of type checking. So you could say it's Boolean, a string, an int, things like that. But if it's a string, for instance, it won't then go, that doesn't make sense as a setting, and we'll try and apply it. But yes, there is some sanity checking in there. Right, not done yet. But it is done. Oh. Wait, I see movement. Right. What's something else we can pick on? Right. So you can drag and drop machines to deploy. So let's run compute workloads on the controller as well. So what could possibly go wrong there, right? I had you there. So this is sort of what you saw on the web interface using the CLI, creates a temporary file, drops the JSON into it so you can have a look at it or change it, and should be able to see here. I find this section with the hardware in it. You can see here that it's already picked up the Nova Compute KVM there, and it's listed the two machines. The 0-2 is the compute node, and the 0-1 is the controller node. And it will be in the middle of applying that. So we can query what hypervisors we have. Interesting. I thought I had that. Oh, I can't spell. That's well known, I'm afraid. Ah, still can't spell. Awesome. And there we have the original hypervisor with Chef doing its thing. Chef really doing its thing. And there's the second hypervisor. So I think that is all I have. There's more information at the Crowbar homepage, crowbar.github.io. And any further questions?
Has Crowbar been used for production deployment or only?
We have many production deployments using Crowbar. I don't know if I can name any customers, but there's lots of them.
Thank you.
Up the back.
Could you talk a bit more about upgrades in the time available?
About what, sorry?
Your plans for upgrading in place?
Right, so that's work that's currently ongoing at the moment. It'll appear in Crowbar 4, which is going to come out with the OpenStack, SUSE Cloud 7, which is due out at some point in the new year. So the plan there is to upgrade the OS of the admin node, which will give us the new configuration and the new repositories with more up-to-date packages, and then you go through each machine, upgrade their OS, and then upgrade the package, so that we need to make sure, for instance, that we can upgrade the Nova controller while the compute nodes are still, for example, running Cloud 6 or Crowbar 3 and an older version of Slice. I'm personally not working on that. I'm at the moment dealing with upstream Neutron configuration and integration with the new product, as well as Mitaka and but I understand that there'll be an API and a web interface and the CLI where you can kick off the upgrade as well as monitor its progress, see if there are any issues, as well as an estimated time to completion, I think, but I'm not certain. It's been a while since I read the docs about it.
All right, on that note, if you'll all please join me in thanking Steve.